What does it mean to truly be rich? And what can a grave tell us about the life we lead? This is a question Saadi explored through a story, and it may bring us closer to understanding the kind of riches worth seeking. A young man, affluent and proud, standing near his father's grave. He admired the polished stone and the marbled floor beneath it, the fine turquoise bricks that lined the edges, and the colorful inscriptions that spoke of wealth and stature. Nearby, there was another young man, the son of a dervish. His father's grave, in stark contrast, was simple, built only of mud bricks, covered in a blanket of soil, unadorned and humble. The rich young man glanced at his neighbor, a small smile of satisfaction playing on his lips. He could not resist the urge to speak of his father's grandeur. He spoke of the finely sculpted stone coffin, of the painstakingly carved inscriptions, and of the marble, so smooth it gleamed under the midday sun. He spoke with pride, as if the opulence of his father's resting place proved the worth of his lineage, the value of his existence. The son of the dervish listened quietly, nodding gently as the rich young man spoke. He seemed neither impressed nor offended. When the other finally finished speaking, the dervish's son turned his eyes towards his own father's humble mound and spoke softly, almost as if he were thinking aloud. He remarked that the kind of wealth one carries to the grave was perhaps different from the one his companion described. He did not argue, he simply shared a thought that seemed to rise naturally from his heart. The simplicity of his father's grave, he said, was not an indication of the life his father led, or of where he now was. By the time the heavy stone of his companion's father would stir, his own father would already be at peace, walking in gardens of paradise. His journey was unburdened, while the rich man's grave seemed to mirror the weight of the material world that still bound him. The rich young man, for a moment, was struck silent. The words were simple, yet they lingered. He saw the humble mound before him and found that, indeed, there was a kind of peace in its simplicity. It seemed as though the earth had gently embraced the dervish's body, allowing his spirit to move freely onward, while the heavy adorned stone of his own father's tomb appeared to trap more than just a body beneath its weight. The words of the dervish's son reverberated in his mind like poetry that he could not fully comprehend but felt deeply. He who has walked the path of truth will pass through death with joy, he thought, and indeed he saw it. In the lightness of the dervish's resting place, there was a promise of comfort, of joy beyond the horizon of this world. Saadi's story suggests that perhaps true wealth is not the marble or the inscriptions that speak of worldly grandeur. It is not in the polished stone, but in the lightness with which one can leave the world behind. The rich young man realized that what mattered was not the opulence left above the earth, but the freedom with which one moved beyond it. As he was about to leave, he turned once more to the grave of the dervish. In that moment, he saw not the mud bricks or the simple soil. He saw a door, an open one, light and inviting, leading beyond this world to a garden unseen. And, for the first time, he felt the weight of the polished stone beneath his feet, the weight of a wealth that bound, instead of set free. The rich young man left the cemetery, with his heart heavy but his spirit lighter, as though something within him had shifted, unlatched itself. He understood now. The journey beyond this life is not paved with marble or turquoise, but with the truth one walks during life. He looked at the opulence his family had left behind, and he could not help but think, how fortunate is he who is freed from a prison he did not know he was in. The moral of Saadi's story is simple. Wealth that binds is not wealth at all. True riches are carried in the spirit, and the lightness of one's journey is not determined by what is left above the earth, but by how one lived upon it. The young man learned that the question was never whose tomb was finer, but whose spirit walked lighter into the gardens of the next world, and so, in the end, he found his answer. The riches worth seeking were not those that lay above the ground, but those that carried one beyond it, and with that understanding, he walked away, leaving behind not only the cemetery, but also, perhaps, a part of his old self that had been weighed down by stones of pride.